All right, now to our first conversation. Now, we're seeing 2024, Nigeria experienced significant decline there in female participation in that's tech ecosystem, and definitely there've been talk, so much talk about, getting more participation right there in the tech ecosystem. We see female representation in tech workforce, that's about 22%. Female students in computer science and engineering, that's about 17%. Female co-founders in tech startups, was less than 10%. Female-led startups receiving funding from 2019 to 2023, that was about 10% of funded startups. And we also see economic impact and market size of Nigeria's tech ecosystem. We see for the 2024 value there, ICT sector contributed about 17.89% to the GDP. So much to unpack there. And yeah, we've seen a couple of startups there do really well, when it comes to, raising funds. All right, let's discuss this with Naomi Williams. She's a tech leader at Black Girls in Tech. And she joins me right here in the studio. It's great to have you.
It's good to be here. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, definitely. We're seeing, female representation in Nigeria's tech ecosystem.
Yeah.
It seems it's not really improved much, but from your experience, what are you seeing?
It hasn't improved much. It hasn't changed over time. It's still very much, globally, it's still very much a male-dominated field inside Africa, in Nigeria, and the rest of the world. But there are organizations and there's individuals that are making strides to improve the landscape for women in general. And I believe it actually starts with education, because you can't have a women-enabled tech workforce, or even a tech workforce in general, without capacity. And capacity building is where the major gap, if we were to focus on Nigeria, capacity is where the major gap lies. You have great infrastructure that's been built by a lot of these corporations, like the Flutterwaves, the Paystacks. That's like the infrastructure, right? But there's the ecosystem of what the landscape of tech in Nigeria is going to look like in the next 10, 20 years. But so I look at it like this, I'll give you an example. So we have Paystack, we have Flutterwave. These are, payment gateways that enable transactions, etc. And then you have the Glovos and the Chowdex, which is part of the ecosystem, because they use these payment gateways to allow customers to be able to make payments. You have your fintech banks and you have your microfinance banks that allow you to be able to be digitally banked. But there's a lot more that goes into a digitally enabled society. You need to be able to verify your audiences, you need to be able to raise funds, you need to be able to build like rental apps that work, and they work for everybody. And if we have maybe the 1% of people who end up building these things, who's going to actually maintain it and make sure that it grows at scale? You need like a large population that's actually going to use it, or that's actually going to keep it going. And if education, which I've noticed is like the biggest gap in this whole ecosystem, if that's not plugged in the next few years, we're just going to continue to have like the 1%, and you have these unicorns, but the rest of the population,
right,
the rest of the people
because I want to believe,
behind.
Women also have great ideas, because it's not just the men,
women have
obviously.
Women have great ideas.
Right.
Come on, like, I don't think we're that archaic that we don't believe that women have great ideas, but it's whether they have the access to do this. In parts of Nigeria, there's still communities that don't send their girls to school, who don't believe that they have a right to education, or if they send them to school, they only go to learn vocational skills and things that will help prepare them for marriage. And that's not a reflection of the world outside of those communities. And I feel like there's particular areas in Nigeria that are falling like way behind, and education, again, is like the very focal point. It's by exposure and education that that mindset starts to shift.
Right, but you're a Black girl in tech, or a Black woman.
Yeah.
In tech at this point.
Yeah.
Tell me about your experience.
So my experience, so I was born in Nigeria, born in Lagos, but I grew up abroad. I moved when I was 10. My exposure to tech, I think I lived in the West, so exposure to tech, it comes from you have a computer at home, you have access to data. Another huge problem for a lot of communities in Nigeria, even basic access to data. If you don't have access to data, you don't have access to education, tech education, or what that means. But again, I digress. So I went to school, I went to university, I studied psychology, which is what's given me my foundation of understanding user needs and just user behavior that actually helps me build products. So I spent most of my career working in finance, gaming, supply chain, decarbonization, e-commerce, media, just understanding user behavior and making sure it kind of aligns with business needs, or trying to amalgamate the two to actually build digital products. So I speak from a place of privilege. I was educated in the West. I had a computer in my house. Even when I was growing up here, actually, I used computers in the school I went to, Green Springs in Anthony Village, before they had one in Kuwait. I've always had access to tech education, and even the way I stumbled upon my career in tech, again, it's a matter of privilege, but that's not the case for many people in Nigeria today, right? They need that exposure, and that means that governments and educational institutions have to work together to make sure that, you know, the policies that are in place incentivize the schools to do more. The institutions actually need to change the actual curriculum, because again, as part of me coming back to Nigeria and spending time trying to understand what building capacity means. I mean, Black Girls in Tech has been an NGO in Nigeria for coming up to 5 years. We started off as a community in the UK, but in spending time here, I've looked at syllabuses, and I just see that what they're being taught in schools is actually not on par with the real digital world outside of that silo. And in order for that education to improve and to see change at scale, that's one of the things that actually needs to change in the first instance.
Like yesterday.
Like yesterday,
at this point.
it's actually critical, because if that doesn't happen within the next like 3 years, I would hate to see or understand what digital enablement or what capacity looks like in terms of the workforce in Nigeria, because you have these organizations, these businesses that are trying to introduce, like, they'll say, oh, we want to introduce AI, or want to this new digital thing, but the workforce that you're hiring, they don't have exposure to these things. And don't get me wrong, yes, most people have a phone, but just because you have a phone doesn't mean you're digitally enabled, because at a basic level, again, in spending time here, first of all, BGIT the goal was to teach people how to code. But then once we started going into micro communities, we realized that actually a lot of people don't even know how to use a computer. You don't know how to type a document. You don't know how to make the headline bold. You don't know how to underline. You don't know how to do italics. You don't know how to formate a sentence. You don't know how to create a presentation. How then can they go into the workforce with all these businesses that spring up? And you know, Nigeria has like one of the biggest, has one of the most amount of like businesses, whether informal or formal, however you want to split that data.
We've been described as a hustler economy at some point.
Yeah, it is.
Well, let's look at some of the data now when it comes to infrastructure and connectivity. We're seeing when it comes to internet penetration there, high mobile internet penetration, however, broadband access remains limited in rural areas. If you put that infrastructure and connectivity data up, we see power supply, frequent power outages impact tech operations and productivity. There's also the regulatory issue there, when it comes to, regulating, new technology and all of that. So what are you seeing, when it comes to regulation, in Nigeria, in Africa?
So here's the thing. I think you hear about these initiatives. Oh, we're going to launch this, or we're going to build this AI thing, and we're going to train thousands of people. And that's all well and good. It's very commendable, but is it reaching the people that it should reach? And again, just because you train them, okay, you get them, you shuttle them on a bus, you take them to an institution, put them there for 12 weeks, but at some point they need to be able to practice what they've learned, and they go home, they've got data on their phones, but they don't have computers, they don't have stable electricity, they don't even necessarily have that connectivity that they need to be able to put it into action. So that stalls growth. I remember I was approached by a commissioner for his local government, and he said, oh, he would like to do IT training with like some of his constituents. Like he wants to provide that capacity. Very commendable. I appreciate it. But he said to me, "Oh, can you teach them on their phones?" And on one hand, I don't want to say no because I think any small education that I can pass down, any small learnings that I can pass on is valuable. But at the same time, that's not the way it should be. Like, you should be able to provide a center, a learning center where people can go and spend time and learn how to do things the proper way. Because I think learning on phones and being able to do things on the phones, okay, I can write a document on my phone, but that's a byproduct of me evolving with technology and having access and knowing how to do it properly in the standard way when you go into an organization. Because when you go into an office, you're not going to be working on your phone. Like, if you hired somebody to be your PA, they're not going to be working from their phone. They're going to come in, they're going to sit down, you'll have meetings where they have to create presentations, you're going to have to pitch to partners.
I guess tablets can cut it.
No, I mean, it can. So the thing is, at some point you have to compromise, but if you're not even trying to provide the basic and you're trying to cut corners initially, what's the point?
All right, so because I've heard my my kids tell me that, oh, Daddy, we need a laptop.
Yeah.
At this point, it's like tabs.
Yeah.
Are not really cutting out. But we know the prices of these gadgets they're not cheap.
They're not cheap.
You're trying to buy a laptop now, you're spending north of 800,000, depending on the spec. So affordability is a big issue.
Affordability is a big issue, but here's the thing, right? There's those who have and can do, but then this is where the government and I believe institutions need to come together, and there should be so many learning centers across Nigeria, because a population that is educated can compete on a broader level. And at the moment, we're not even in the game. We're not even in the game at all. I've asked one of our volunteers to kind of do a deep dive to see, okay, where can we find learning centers across Nigeria? And oftentimes we're relying on private individuals who built businesses to build their own innovation hubs, but they're doing their part. Where's everyone else doing their part? Like, it's going to take a lot of collective effort and sacrifice to get Nigeria to where it needs to be. And that starts from the top down. And it's not just down to the few who are just taking it upon themselves. Like, everyone has a part to play. Like, teachers, head teachers need to work together with the government. You need to revise your syllabuses. Like, there's so much work to be done. But it starts now. It should have started yesterday.
Should have started yesterday. Exactly. Yeah. So, talk to me about your vision, for the future.
My vision
when it comes to digital literacy.
Like equity and access. I believe that everyone has a right to a really great quality of education. They need to be learning. Students need to be learning, or everyone. It's not even just students. I even believe, like, I'll give you an example. So, we have the highest number, I think like 40% of businesses are informal. They're not registered. So the person that you buy your guinea fowl from, the person that brings my fruit from Abbey Estate, things like that. But they're not necessarily digitally enabled. So they will want to go to the bank because they want to expand their business. And the bank is saying, no, they're not qualified for a loan. Why aren't they qualified for a loan? Because they haven't registered their business with the CAC. They haven't, if the bank is saying, like, what's your profit loss margin, the data that's it, because, do you know what? I had a friend that worked at WhatsApp Business many years ago, and I didn't understand why anyone would conduct business by WhatsApp, because for me, it's a social tool, it's a communication tool for my friends around the world. And then what I realized was that actually in places like India, Hyderabad, Ghana, Nigeria, it's a way to conduct businesses. But all this customer data sits inside there, but they don't necessarily know how to take that data out, put it in spreadsheets and in a way that speaks to those who are going to give you the funds to kind of expand your business. So you get rejected for a business loan, you won't understand why. So my vision is to make sure that everyone has equity and access to a quality digital education that prepares them for what the real world is like, for what the future of Nigeria, what the future of tech looks like in Nigeria in the coming years.
Right, and sometimes when I try to look into the future, I see robots. But I guess
we're not there yet. We're not
Maybe
there yet. And
time.
the thing is, everyone thinks, I also believe that sometimes with tech, everyone kind of gets carried away and be like, AI this, AI that, automation. But is Nigeria ready for automation? At the scale that they think the UK is doing it, absolutely not. Because again, for that, for AI to play a prominent part, or for us to have data centers or things like that, you need data access. You need power stability. You need a population that understands what that is. Another example, before the Nigerian government fined Meta, I remember last year, early last year, I was on Lagos Talks, and what I realized was that when you are in Nigeria, or your IP, is it IP? What's the thing that's called?
Yeah,
Anyway,
IP, yeah.
Your IP is set to Nigeria. You cannot opt out of Meta using your data to train their AI. You can't. And we're a population of, 200 million plus. And there's things like that that we're even talking about education, but there's data misuse, cybersecurity, and I just think that we have a long way to go before
Well,
we start talking
with
robots.
one step at a time.
One
and
step,
hopefully,
and that
you know,
is
we get
education.
there and being intentional.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
education.
It was great having this conversation with you.
Thank you.
Naomi Williams. She's a tech leader, Black Girls in Tech.
Yes.
Thank you for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.